Okay, so welcome to the third lecture on our Ever Wanted to Be an Explorer webinar series, where we learn about World Heritage Sites as inspiring learning environments. And on the previous lectures, I have presented the Ever Wanted to Be an Explorer learning project that we did a couple of years ago in central Finland with Tikkala UNESCO school pupils and Humak community educator students. And in the second webinar, we talked about outdoor adventure education and applications of adventurous learning in schools. And today, my plan is to talk about cultural heritage education in general, provide some inspiring materials and ideas about cultural heritage education. And then to finish with, I'm going to give some practical examples about assignments and exercises that the Tikkala school teachers planned for their pupils on our expedition to Oravivuori Struve Arc station point. But first, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about cultural heritage education. When we talk about World Heritage Sites, that the Struve Arc station point and the Struve Arc measurement chain also is, we also talk about cultural heritage education. And at least the Finnish curriculum, the core curriculum also has goals for cultural heritage education in schools. But to kind of broadly define cultural heritage education and cultural heritage is something or everything that means something to you in the surroundings, in the nature or buildings. Like good examples of old buildings from some era are cultural heritage. Ancient burial sites are cultural heritage. So basically everything that is a reflection or an expression about interaction of people and places through time, something that tells a story about our past, our history, can be defined cultural heritage. But thinking about this topic, I think that it's actually a really good definition that everything that means something to you, that can be cultural heritage. I'm going to later on this lecture share one exercise that you can do with pupils at school, where you think about what is cultural heritage to them in their surroundings. And when I started thinking about my hometown and what would be my cultural heritage in the area, I would actually name a big rock on a hill. It's a big rock in the middle of the forest that has a cave under it. It's a erratic block that the glaciers moved here in the north after the ice age. So it's also heritage of a like natural phenomena. But what makes it important to me is that when I was a child, we used to go on a picnic with my grandfather to that rock and talk about the rock and think about how did it come to that place and so on. And this kind of places can also be cultural heritage to us. So just to kind of to broaden the idea that it does not have to be a UNESCO listed World Heritage Site that you visit if you don't have a Struve Arc point near you. Or then you can start helping school children think about the cultural heritage of the area that they live in, which also is one goal of cultural heritage education. These are some examples from the Finnish core curriculum that are goals of cultural heritage education. Like, for example, to help pupils develop a positive attitude towards the environment, preserving the environment, then also to learn and appreciate their own environment and cultural heritage, and also recognize significant cultural environments. And in the Finnish core curriculum, it also states that in schools, we should encourage pupils to reflect on their own background and their position in relation to previous generations. Like, I think one good example of this was in our Oravivuori expedition, when our students were dressed as Mr. Georg Wilhelm von Struve, and they started discussing with the kids about life 200 years ago in the area, and thinking about what kind of technical applications did people at that time have to find their way around, and how was the natural area at that time? Were there more forests or less forests? And in what kind of buildings did people live there, and what kind of life did they lead? So just to give a bit broader idea about World Heritage Sites as environments for cultural heritage education. Okay, then moving on to the practical parts that I have been talking about. Of course, when you look at the internet and browse the web, you will find a lot of good material about World Heritage and World Heritage Sites as learning environments. But I want to give you this one tip about, in my opinion, a really good learning material. It has information and simple tasks and assignments for pupils about the UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Finland, and about UNESCO World Heritage in general. And the good thing about this material is that it's also in 3 languages. You can find it in Finnish, English, and Swedish. And if you follow that link, you will find these small exercise books that you can print out, and background material. And actually, I wanted to share this one task or exercise that they have in this material that, in my opinion, is very good. And the idea of that is to think about your own environment and the routes you travel every day with the pupils, and draw a map of the own area with the pupils. Have everyone draw their own map of the area and start naming roads, buildings, parks, and other places not with their real names, but with a name that means something to the pupil himself or herself. Like, for example, Helsinki Street, from the child's point of view, could be called the school journey road. And this exercise is something that you can develop further and further, and also move into discussing the day-to-day surroundings of the school and of the kids, and what kind of places are meaningful for them, and so on. But this is just one example from this learning material, and I really suggest you look into it after this webinar. And it also has simple, good background information about the Struve arc, measurement chain, and World Heritage sites and World Heritage in general. Very good. Also, the International UNESCO Associated Schools Network produces a lot of good learning material for schools related to World Heritage education and cultural heritage education. And as you may remember, the Tikkala school that we did our project with is also a part of the UNESCO Associated Schools Network. And there are hundreds of UNESCO schools all around the world. So they are also a kind of a good network for international cooperation. But they also, if you look into the UNESCO Associated Schools or UNESCO websites, they have good resources there. Unfortunately, the official main page of the network is under maintenance at the moment, and has been so for weeks, and will be opened in some later point of time. But you still can look into some materials from the UNESCO sites, and this educational resource kit for teachers is also something I really can recommend. They have practical assignments, tasks about World Heritage, and ideas about what kind of task or assignments can you do with your pupils if you visit a World Heritage site. And like you can see, it's almost a 200-page resource kit, but I want to introduce some of its content and one little exercise that I chose because I thought it was kind of a really good combination of cultural heritage education and adventure education and like student participation. So this activity is called Heritage Trails, and the idea of this activity is to help students enjoy adventure and exploration, but also underline the idea that I actually talked about in the first slide, that everything that has a meaning to you can be cultural heritage. So in this activity, the idea is that when you go on a field trip or when you start planning a learning project outside the school, the pupils themselves start thinking about the place that you are about to visit and start planning their own heritage trail through that area. You can think about what kind of a trail it should be. Is it a natural heritage trail, cultural heritage trail, urban heritage trail, or what kind of a trail is it? And plan the theme of the trail together and like involve the pupil from the very beginning and plan the whole day. But yeah, I'm not going to read through this whole exercise. You are going to get the material afterwards to look into with more detail. But in this activity and resource book, there are good examples of activities that help you to plan discussions or research-based approach to World Heritage Sites, exercise, role plays, or actual suggestions to visiting World Heritage Sites. And they also have actually quite good examples of student activity sheets with activities prior to the visit to a World Heritage Site, activities you can do during the visit, and activities you can do after the visit. And of course, the idea of this material is also to help students to think about World Heritage in a worldwide international scale. So for me, at least, this has been a good material, and I may not have used these exercises is exactly as they are in this material, but browsing through this material and the different activities has given me good ideas on what kind of activities we could do with students and pupils, and how could we apply them. Okay, then moving on to some examples of the assignments that the Tikkala school teachers planned for different school subjects for the expedition groups that the pupils did. And these were all assignments that the Tikkala school pupils did while they were walking the nature trail and when we were visiting the Oravivuori Struve Arc measurement point. So as you probably remember, we had divided the children into different theme groups based on what are they interested in. And the mathematics and measurements group that we had, they had, for example, different types of assignments on estimating the distance in the nature. So, for example, when they started walking, their task was to estimate how long the trail was in kilometers that they walked. And when we reached the top, their task was to write down their guess, and then they compared the estimate to the actual distance, and they talked about how did they come to the conclusion that they guessed, and what kind of means did they have to help them to estimate the distance. Also, from the top of Oravivuori, the kids picked up a landmark, and they tried to estimate the distance in kilometers to the landmark. And actually, from the top of Oravivuori observation tower, you can see the small Korpilahti town center, and there is a really huge bridge over Lake Päijänne that you can see. And those were, for example, the kind of landmarks they chose and estimated the distance, and talked about how long would it take to arrive there by foot or by car, or so on. Then they also practiced different geometric forms in the nature, where they used the group members as kind of the points of the forms, and used a rope between them. They formed circles with a certain diameter, and equilateral triangles, and so on, a square. And during the walk, they also practiced common fractions, like estimating when have they walked 1/3 of the distance or 3/4 of the distance, just to give some examples. Then one of the groups was the nature group. Some of these examples are pretty obvious, because when we go outdoors on a nature trail, observing the flora and fauna around you is one of the assignments that easily comes to your mind. So one of the tasks that the pupils had was to stop at the chosen spot and make a list of different plants they recognized, think about which type of forest that is, what are the names of the trees that grow there, think about, is this a shady or bright location, wet or dry, look at the plants on the ground level, maybe look at are there some things in the plants that can help you define which way is north, which way is south, and so on. And this kind of environmental education tasks or assignments, you can develop further and further into thinking about the ecology of the place and the relationships between different animals and plants. Like, for example, thinking about if you find moss somewhere, thinking about which animals eat the moss. Are there animals that eat that animal who eats the moss, and start thinking about like the wider perspective of ecology, of course, depending on the age of the children. Then one simple assignment that the kids had was to find cones, käpy in Finnish, and stop at some location and see if you can find cones. Think about where did they come from, what is their purpose in nature, what kind of animals eat the cones, and can you find cones that someone has been eating? So those are a kind of biology and nature science based activities. But then, of course, when you are out in the nature, it's a perfect place to build your relationship to nature. So some of the assignments during the trip was just walking along the path and leaving the path to touch the plant or touch the ground or look at something with you see with or without a magnifying glass, and taste and smell things. You can see there, eat berries and so on. And I think this assignment, it was just to get the feeling of the nature and leave the trail for a while, and there was no reflection or assignment controlled by the teacher after it. And another one was the nature's television, where the task was just to lay on your back and relax and listen and watch the sky and enjoy a moment of silence in the nature, just to connect with the nature. And one application of this kind of assignment that I have also sometimes used is that if we have a group of students, we all start walking, like for example, for 1 minute into our own directions from a circle, and then stop for 5 minutes after the teacher blows a whistle, and just stay there and take your own moment in the middle of the nature. And then after 5 minutes, we return and maybe share some thoughts about how did it feel to be alone in the nature in silence, or then just let the experience be as it is and continue walking. So the nature group, they had assignments that were like really related to nature sciences or biology or so on, but they also had assignments for building the relationship with nature. And then almost the last slide. Some ideas about the exercises that the arts group had. One of them was called Nature's Design. They had prepared beforehand these picture frames made of cardboard, and they were in the binder on the trip. And the task was to photograph nature's own artwork by choosing some spots and holding the frame up and framing that piece of artwork and taking a photograph of it. Another one was drawing sketches. They had sketchbooks with them, and they chose, for example, an old tree along the trail and made sketches of it with crayons and pencils and color pencils. And some of them they continued to finish after the trip at school to make drawings and paintings. Another one of the arts group was related to observing and feeling the natural surfaces a bit more closer. They had a paper and crayons, and they put the paper on the surface and used the crayon sideways on the paper to color the pattern of the surface on the paper. This was a bit tricky exercise on our expedition day because, like I told, the weather was horrible. It was pouring rain almost for the whole for the whole day. And then I have listed also using tablets and cameras to take videos and photographs along the way, which was one of the assignments also for the pupils. And then last but not least, a couple of more like miscellaneous ideas. One exercise that all the groups did was forming the Struve measurement chain on the ground. And like we all know, the Struve arc chain stretches from Black Sea to Norway throughout Europe. So in this assignment, those chains represented the countries along the Struve arc chain, and on those white pieces of paper there was written down the country and one Struve arc UNESCO site in that country. And the task of the pupils was to put them in right order, beginning from the Black Sea and ending up in Norway, and thinking about kind of the map of Europe and in which order do the countries follow each other. Then one of our theme groups was the map group, and they had a task of taking photographs along the way, and especially from the tower on the top of the hill, like downwards toward the hill, and then using those photographs after the trip at the school to draw their own map of the area, and using symbols that real maps have, and kind of practice drawing map and reading map and observing their surroundings. And one group also planned different possible souvenirs for tourists from the Oravivuori Struve Arc Point. Very good. That's all I have to say about the topic. This is the end of the mini lecture.